On this episode from the Ed of Ed, this is a continuing episode from part 2, where I last left off on oiling and having cleaned the machine, starting to oil the thing up. So here we'll oil this guy up and see if there's anything else wrong with it and start putting it back together and testing it. Okay, so I got the hand crank here, and it's one of those aha moments I was mentioning earlier. Oh, I'm missing a part here maybe, but it's not. It's just the location where this guy latches into that guy and is held in. This is the release for your hand crank. So it's one of those O's. So I do have that. After all, there is a hole here for that point, and that point just goes in and click, we're in business, and then release and we come out. As simple as that. Kind of a nice little thought ahead by them folks 100 years ago. Now it's kind of a case of giving this guy more oil. I don't know how much of this I'll do real time, probably not a whole lot. I'm sure you folks aren't be that interested in me oiling this guy forever. Well, I don't know what else I can do other than that. I think it's gotta be kind of careful I don't damage somebody. Let's see if I can enter a number here. Well, big old so far, everything looking pretty reasonable. I'll put just a little drop on these guys. Okay, well, I don't think I can do much more than that. I think that's pretty good. like I say, these guys somehow engage these guys for carrying. See, I'll push a couple down, and I think what they'll do is they'll hit crash. Yeah, they did work those. I think those pins and those points where they, so where do they strike? It looks like there's a little surface back here. I don't know if I can really show it very well. I think what they're doing is they're hitting these surfaces here, so I'm going to try and put a little drop. Oil at those surfaces. And then I think it looks like these pins strike another surface, and this pin here is especially worn. I think it's the other point where they hit. Obviously they're hitting on this somewhere. They're probably hitting it certainly looks like they're hitting along these surfaces here, this point here, maybe this point here. So I'm going to put just a little dab of oil on those surfaces. And that's probably about all I can do on this, really. Okay, well, that's probably all I can do. I'm sure it's exciting watching this, so see if I can speed things up a little bit here. Otherwise, I'll edit this, obviously, so the next thing is to probably lubricate this guy really good. Of course, this guy's been cleaned the least. It hasn't gotten any sort of can't complain. I think that's pretty good, so I'm going to probably call that good there. And then I guess the next thing to consider is the keyboard, which has been pretty much de-oiled too, so it's a long haul here. Everyone gets their quota of oil. I get everything all soiled again with oil again here on the surface to collect dirt. So anyhow, I'll run through this and then we'll come back and a few minutes. Been playing around with that a little bit, and it's kind of disappointing in some ways that the cleaning of the plastic parts, as it were, the results have been so kind of unsatisfactory. They don't look as nice and shiny as they oddly enough did when they were dirty. And all I've done is simply soap and water and try to be really gentle with these guys. So they have kind of an oxidized, dried out look about them. It's one of those I'll have to figure out how to do better on. And here I'm just trying to wiggle these guys back on without forcing down on the mechanism itself that actually does all the latching and so forth. You don't want to put a lot of force into that. So try and hold it from the underside and kind of wiggle them on. It looks to be the method. And I'm hoping that maybe over time a little bit of body oil, or maybe I'll look at some little light oil, some sort that might bring the shine back out. Maybe there's some natural oils that would make them look good again. And I might also just color fill these guys. So the biggest thing is to figure out how to get these all back on evenly. I almost wish now I hadn't done it this way. I almost wish I had maybe done the ultrasonic soap and water thing like I did with the CST8. Might have been simpler and just left it all together. So I guess it's just a matter of very slowly, systematically pushing these guys on and not stressing the mechanism too much. I think what I'll do is maybe I'll get a board and make certain that I'm not over traveling these guys against their stops. I think that's what I'll probably try next. So I'll populate away here, and hopefully the next time you see this thing it'll have all the parts on it again. Okay, so quite a few pressings later, getting these keyboards, key buttons in place. Big thing is board transmit the stresses through there and not through the mechanism itself. And some of them went on nice and easy, some went on really hard, and a few of the keys they're not quite as flush as I would like. There's a few of them that are like this 9 that's really wants to go on, and I can't convince it to go on any further, and others are maybe over traveled, perhaps they're too far up. So it's as good as I think I can get it, and I think it looks pretty good. And the keys actually are starting to look a little bit better. They don't look as oxidized as I thought they did. Maybe the reds are a little bit, just the nature of the color. So, and I guess the next thing to do is put this little kind of a gear flip thing back into the keyboard here. See if I can get that into this part here. So that's in there. And then the next thing is getting this keyboard in. I've tried putting this guy in once before, or Truth in Advertising here, and I got it in there and I went, oh, why isn't this working? The machine, you could spin it and push the buttons and everything worked fine, but the 3 buttons over here deal with releasing clearing the keyboard, maintaining the keyboard in its whatever press state doesn't automatically clear the keyboard, and the other one, let's see here, it basically cancels the repeat function, and the repeat function was not working right, or I should say it was not clearing, I believe, and that's because there's this little arm here that's worked off of a little cam on this guy, and there is a little cam here that presses up against, and it presses down against this one bar. It goes through all these guys and either pops them out or latches them in place. I'm not sure which way that's going at the moment. So anyhow, this guy here this surface here has to seat up against this side. So if you happen to have it sitting like that, which is I think what I did, that function doesn't work. And then there's on the other side of that thing is a mechanism here that works up against a disc, kind of back behind the intermediate gears, and that will work or not work this guy for clearing your keyboard. And so that part basically just wasn't running because I didn't have that set up right. So it's those little details that will confuse you quite a bit for a while. And let's see if we can get this guy in. It's kind of a fumbly bit. The mechanism that unlatches my hand crank doesn't really want to go through this slot very well, and that's because this frame is slightly tweaked from that brazing job. So that will be a little bit of a challenge to get that part in. And then it's just a matter of getting this all lined up right and getting that little cam in there. See if I can do this. This has, been a few attempts already, so I'd like to say I'm some whiz-bang expert on this, but I'm just not. And it's fumbly, I guess, compared to like repairing a car or something like that. It's still pretty easy. But getting that in is a kind of a challenge. I wish this frame had been tweaked like it had, obviously. You work on these YouTube videos and you don't got the very good sound system. I've been trying with things like a little clip-on microphone that still has a little bit of humming noise back in it. Then you get the occasional traffic going by. And now, in my instance, I have cows in the background. In case you're hearing cows, they're not my cows, by the way, but I do enjoy them. So, if you hear a moo every once in a while, that's what that is. I don't know why those cats are so active today. Well, that seemed especially difficult. I mean, I've had troubles. I've tried to put this thing in a couple times. I've just goofed on this and missed that kind of thing. That seemed especially troublesome. Okay. So, there we go. So we got this guy in to the point where you can see that cam is up against that other, or cam, or lever against a cam, lever against lever, however you want to define that, I guess. And so now I think I can just put in my 4 screws and then this one screw that keeps this plate from pushing up, and then of course defeating that whole little part from working. Let's see if we can get this all in here. Well, cows, you're ruining my YouTube presentation here of obscure mechanical devices. I did notice that right hand little catch arm, it was a little stiff before, so obviously part of that problem of the frame being a bit tweaked. I'm not sure what I can do about that. It's going to it just wants to rub a little too much and catch. I think they're just meant to be there to capture the carriage, and normally aren't utilized anyways. I don't think it'll be a problem. Look at the good screwdriver for this guy. Okay, so we put our caps back in. The R invokes the repeat. Once again, try and hold down on that stem so you don't stress the mechanism itself trying to put these guys on. And I think everybody's happy. Okay, that worked. Seems promising. That should stay up, down. It does. And then that cancels it. Okay, repeats. That was the impression. Okay, so I guess it's actually that one cancels. Okay, what is it? Really getting to run this thing for the first time, you know. So let's see here. So I got if I have it with repeat up and this O down, O 0, it will it'll cancel each after each cycle. If I have it in repeat, they'll stay down, and you'll just keep adding more or multiplying more and more of those items in there, and then that clears everybody. That would clear it. That clears it. Okay, so this clears everything. Yeah, it almost seems like this big button really ought to be over here. I'll have to look at that. I mean, this is how it came, but it almost seems like to me the big button ought to be over here, huh? Because what that does is it just clears the whole keyboard. There's the whole keyboard's cleared. Now we're in repeat. Oh, I guess I could put some numbers in there, huh? Okay, keep putting those numbers in. We basically disengage that repeat mode, and now each time it will clear the keyboard automatically for you, which is handy for addition. And then if you have numbers in there and you decide you don't want those, you can just erase them, or the whole keyboard, or if you're in repeat mode and you're done with it, for instance, you eliminate it then, and then you'd still, well, I can actually push two buttons down if I'm not careful. It'll do repeat mode and they'll cancel it afterwards. Okay, or yeah, something like that. So I don't know. It just seems like that ought to be over there, but I don't know. Maybe that's how it was intended. So the next thing is put the carriage on and see if this thing actually does work. I mean, that's okay. So the next thing is to put the carriage on, and there's two points here that this rod goes through, And then the rod goes through, dang, I keep hitting this guy. This rod goes through 3 points here, and then there's 2 springs. A long spring goes on this side, and a short spring goes on this side. Maybe it would be easier to go this way. And then there's a shoulder that goes into this side here. And we put the big spring in. And there's the fumblies. And then the short spring. Biggest thing is to do all this stuff without stressing everybody, getting that all aligned nicely. There we go, we're on. And it's just this one screw here. Holds this guy on, so this carriage comes on and off very easily. And it just literally slides back and forth. And getting this guy to seat is kind of the question mark. How do you go about seating it? Crash like that, I guess, is probably the way to do it. Because these guys got to hook on. There we go. I guess it takes a little force to get him to push down, and then it looks like my carriage is actually over too far. There we go. This little flipper guy is... it seems like I am stuck. There's no way. Does not want to lift it for some reason. Problem. Oh, I'm probably because I'm not in the right machine cycle. Oh, sure enough. Okay. You gotta, it always goes back to machine cycle. This guy, a lot of things are cued to only happen in certain events. You know, you gotta get these gears that mesh with this. This guy lifts up in order to clear some of those intermediate gears, and it comes back down. And all that has to mesh, and then apparently there's an interlock, or by happenstance, I'm not sure which, it's designed so that you can't move this guy unless this guy's in the correct location, I'm guessing. So without investigating that further, there we go. So basically we're up to that point. So that's the thing that if you're struggling with it, I guess always go back to where the machine is in its cycle. It needs to be at its kind of start cycle location where, you know, you're at the point where you can start typing in numbers, and that's the safe location for that. So there we go. And then the other thing that I questioned earlier, whether or not this big O button and this button were in the wrong location, because I got the machine this way. The big button is sitting over here, and this guy's sitting over here. This key here cancels the keyboard, whereas this button cancels the repeat mode. It takes the repeat mode off, and it looks like somewhere in its earlier life, who knows how long this machine's been this way. When they took it apart, presumably, they reversed these keycaps, because thanks to the miracle of the internet, I was able to look at model K Monroe calculators, and sure enough, everybody else has their keycaps sitting like so. So my machine has had these two buttons in the wrong location for maybe the majority of its life, for all I know. So that's that's where they're supposed to be. Okay, and then we got our repeat mode that you cancel. Okay, so see if you do repeat mode, it will always repeat. Okay, so there we go. I guess the next thing is I'd like to. I've lubed this guy with clock oil, but these mechanisms here are really big, husky guys, and they do make quite a strike against these surfaces. So I think these surfaces where they do kind of strike the next mechanism, I'll use a heavier grease, and maybe on these gears here too. But on the little spots where there's a sliding motion, like right here. Capillary action, surface tension of the really light oil is probably more appropriate. It'll stay wicked in there nicely, and it won't cause this to stick and bind up. But I think the heavier spots where they wax things pretty good, I'd probably better use a grease, because these pins, they hit a surface, and then these little slidey guys push against something at the end and so forth. So I think very, very light little bit of lithium grease, just enough to get those surfaces that obviously don't have the wicking surfaces, and any sort of surface where it's a smooth, smooth sliding surface against a smooth sliding surface. A thin light oil probably makes more sense, but for a surface that like on a gear or a spot that kind of whacks another part, basically pops it over, probably better off with a little bit of a light grease. So I think that's what I'll do next. I'll put some grease on this guy, and then I guess I'll start putting the covers on. And it's finally getting to the point now where, it's pretty much a functional machine. So a little more putzing around and this thing will be done. So I thought I'd do a quick little demo of the mechanism itself and how this guy works. Basically, you got these guys that slide back and forth, and you have these fellows that, if I can get one to come down. It's not the one. It's this guy. So those guys come down. They basically are part of the carry mechanism. So this guy will come along here. I don't know if you can see it from that angle. I might have to do a different angle here. Basically, there's a tapered surface. There's a little bit of a taper on these guys, and there's a kind of a taper on these fellows. And this surface, it will engage in either this surface or this surface, and this guy will cause this guy to move forward. And then the end of more sharp, pointy things to point and move with. So this guy gets shifted forward, and then this surface then makes contact with the next gear here. Let's see if I can see a gear better here. Gear here, and it just flicks the gear, and it's basically as simple as that. It's what it does here. This part of the mechanism, I'm a little vague on what it's doing. I guess I have to look at that a little bit more. It looks like it does something that I'm not quite familiar with. It's doing something in the other direction, but to a large degree, that's basically how it is. So you got your carry mechanism, and once this guy is down for whatever reason caused him to move, I guess, he will shift these guys, which will then flick a gear here and advance your number. And then that mechanism here has to be canceled now. So part of it is this pin here Oh shoot, you still can't really see it. Move this over. Disaster is occurring here. Break my machine before I even have a chance to play with it any. These pins are still not particularly visible. Here are these pins, okay? And then those pins will come around and lift that guy back up again. So if I, most awkward way possible, pop this guy back down again, he'll do his carry, and at least in this direction it pushes it back up. So that's why I kind of want to put a little grease on these guys there. These don't have the kind of little wicking surface that these guys do with the lighter oil, which I think would be more appropriate. You want something light that doesn't dry out and causes these to stick, but those surfaces, obviously, you got to have something that's going to cling to that. The heavier grease will be a little more appropriate. So that's how we dance that, and then presumably it works in the other direction. So I got a machine cycle here. I got the end of a machine cycle, and I think I can pop it the other way. More or less. Anyhow, so that's to a large degree that's what this guy does. These guys shift and flick the gear, and I guess they do it in both directions. They're a slightly different design, one side or the other. So obviously one's biased doing it one way, and the other one's biased to the other. And I guess I'd have to go into more detail on that, but that largely gets you I think a pretty good explanation how that's working. It's pretty neat, and obviously it was miniaturized quite a bit. I think it's basically the same fundamental mechanism that's used in like my keep harping about CST-8. It's much miniaturized, and it's in this little kind of a two-bitter half-cut cage with some just perforations in it, so you can't really see it very well. But this guy, it's huge and very visible, so I thought it was kind of neat. So I'll grease this guy up, and getting close to being done here. Okay, so one Monroe 1921 Model K mechanical calculator up and running. It was kind of a nice little fun project. It only just really needed cleaning and oiling again, really. Nothing seems to be particularly mechanically wrong that I needed to fix, just some little TLC. So all the covers are back on, and it's now nice and clean to the point where you're willing to touch it with your bare hands. Learning curve with the key caps and so forth. I suspect that I was making the assumption that the Bakelite had just come out right around this time, that these must be Bakelite, and I suspect they're not. At least the red ones I think are some sort of composition material. This guy here and this guy here might be Bakelite. They have a different gloss to them, for instance. But so not everything on here is probably Bakelite. It might be a composition or celluloid plastic of some sort. So these might want to come off in the future after being dunked in water, because they probably may have swelled up a little bit too if it's kind of a water, wood kind of a byproduct material of some sort that they might have used back then. With it just some sort of a finish of some sort, like a varnish that obviously is pretty frail. So anyhow, it's up to the point now we can do a few simple little items here. Obviously, addition is pretty straightforward. If you got it how to repeat, you crank it 111 plus 222. Not too surprising there. And then subtraction. Let's see here. Yeah, we got to clear that there. Clear that there. I still want to push buttons instead of hand cranking. There's some archive.org copies of how to run these manuals, and a lot of them will have a lot of instruction practice problems, and you think, well, it's a calculator. Why do you need to do practice on a calculator? You push the buttons and the machine does the job for you, right? But even simpler one, obviously the science one, maybe you got a little more going on there. But this guy, it requires some skill. I mean, you got to crank that, crank this. And so, in these how-to books for these guys. They are, giving you a series of problems, and they're giving you the answers. It isn't that you're trying to figure out that problem itself. You're trying to figure out how to run this thing and build up proficiency and skill, because there's a lot of the details you have to do to make this thing run. And so anyhow, 9999, for instance, addition. Okay, I got 999 on there, but I had to crank forward to get that on as though I was doing addition. Now that I'm going to do subtraction, I have to remember to crank backwards, and then we get that right. Okay, so I didn't need to clear it out. It was already 0. It's 0 are all cleared here. So multiplication is just repeated addition. So we put in our number. Let's say 159 times 123. So I already cheating with my calculator, then my modern calculator here. So 159. Put that into the register, and now I got to clock in the 123 into this register. So I've got to crank this guy 3 times, then I move it over 1, crank it in twice, move it over 1, crank it over once, and I got 159 times 123 is 19557. So so far this machine seems to be running fine. There's no accuracy issues going on here as far as I can gauge. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way to the end here. I've found that if I'm on the very, very end, it doesn't seem to ring the bell, so I have to move it over, I think, 2 spaces here. And then from there, we put in everybody's favorite number for playing with your calculator, right? Now I got to get that in the register for division. And I have to clear out this guy, because this is going to be the location where the answer is going to show up. So I've already put 1 clock cycle in there, so I got to eliminate that clock cycle so that doesn't throw off my number. I have to clear that number of the keyboard. And that's the thing, with a regular calculator, you're hitting the clear to clear the result for the next result. Here, the keys stay put, whereas the keys don't stay put here, right? So I have to clear the keyboard before I put in anything else. 1, 1, 3. Now then, I got to do repeated subtractions, and then I'll hear a bell ring when I have an overflow. Then I have to crank it back and hear the bell again to get it back, because I've overshot by 1. Unless I pay attention and know that I'm now going to divide less than that number, in which case I could save the bell ringing. But the machine's supposed to do the work for me, right? So I shouldn't even have to think. I should just listen to the bell, right? Okay, I heard the bell, and I heard the bell again. Okay, so we move over 1. Okay, moved over, back, there we go, move over, okay, over, there. Over. Okay, there we go. Okay, gotta go back. 1, I believe, right? Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right. So there we go. So our good old pi equation there. We got 314,159, which is correct. And I guess that might be a little bit more remainder. I don't. Whatever. And how you determine the location of the decimal pointers here. I'm a little vague on division here, but that's correct there, I guess. Probably the number of points here, you move it over the points there, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Anyhows, a lot of work to make this thing run, but it does run, and it certainly beats having to do it with the old brain when you're doing this day after day, hour after hour. Obviously, it gets to be quite a cognitive labor saver. And had a bit of paint on here they splattered some paint on there at some time in the past after my paint troubles on keycaps and so forth. It's like, I'll just clean this off and call it good enough. And so that's basically it. It's all up and running. You know, I've been collecting a few of these calculators, and every one of them, of course, has troubles. So it's nice to actually have one that actually up and runs now, and I can actually show some friends and say, see, these things actually work. And they'll probably still roll their eyes going, why are you bothering with this stuff? But I find it fun, and presumably if you're bothering to watch this YouTube video, you're finding it fun too. I hope you enjoyed this, and that's it. A 1921 Model K, very much hand-cranked mechanical calculator.